We all check the weather for what to wear or to plan events, but for some of us, weather is a downright obsession. We're storm chasers. This is the journey my chase partner George and I took intercepting hurricanes this year, which took us from a tiny island out in the Atlantic all the way to the Canadian Maritimes. Make no mistake, hurricanes are dangerous storms, and intercepting them takes skill and knowledge. Understanding the dynamics and structure of hurricanes allows chasers to get into the strongest part of the storm and still stay safe. It's all about timing and positioning, but even then we have to be ready and adaptable for a sudden shift from what we were expecting to happen. Forecasting the path of a hurricane is a tough job. Think of a hurricane as a cork in a stream. Rather than affecting the stream, the hurricane just goes with the flow. Often starting near the coast of Africa near the Cape Verde Islands, the nascent storms begin as something known as a tropical wave. This wave travels west across the Atlantic under the influence of the tropical steering winds. As it makes its journey, it begins to turn right and eventually gets caught in winds that propel it north and east. This turn is all important in knowing where and when a hurricane will strike. There are three main areas that tend to get hit in North America: the so-called Hurricane Alley, Florida and the surrounding regions, the American East Coast, and the Canadian East Coast. This year was a real exception to the rule that the US gets hit more often and harder than Canada. Two storms, Earl and Igor, slammed into the Canadian East Coast, doing damage to both Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Igor now has the distinction of being the third wettest hurricane to strike Canada in history. One of the biggest dangers in the storm is water.
The surge is already coming in. We're seeing overtopping roads all around us right now. You can see all these train tracks. The water is actually coming over it, just like almost as if it was a giant river.
Flooding can cut off an escape route fast, and even our preparations might not be enough. Even with our well-equipped chase vehicles, we can still get ourselves into trouble.
What happened?
Stalled out.
Oh,
Probably got water in the intake. I hope not. You have to tow it.
This is why we always intercept as a team. We don't ever go alone. During Hurricane Ike, I got cut off from my team who were just 20 meters away.
There's debris flying everywhere. I can't get back to my original spot. Way too dangerous.
Despite that, my team knew where I was and that I was still safe. Better to stay where I was than chance running across a parking lot full of flying debris and howling wind. It's an amazing experience to see these storms close up, but they can cause massive destruction and tragedy. Chasers are driven by a need to understand and document how these storms work, so that people can see what actually happens when these monsters strike. Our film and data become an important record of what occurs in the heart of a hurricane. Next, a rare occurrence. A named hurricane hits the Canadian coastline. Take a ride with George and I as we head to Nova Scotia to get right in the path of Hurricane Earl. That's coming up right after the long-range forecast.